I read this article, I don't know how many of you also did, that maybe in the next 5 years, or maybe even sooner than that, we'll have a unicorn out there or a large company out there which will have a single employee. Right? And the rest, everything would be AI agents doing most of the work.
At least in India, we are still underestimating the power of AI.
Underestimating.
And I think if I talk to corporates, they're all talking about it. But I think we are still probably have a tunnel vision. It will happen in the future. I think AI is going to hit us far sooner than what any of us are expecting.
Awesome. So thank you so much for coming.
Pleasure, absolutely.
It's
a lovely setting, I must say.
Yes.
It's an interesting setting, right?
Yeah.
Did you imagine that a business school would be in this building?
Well, not really. See, we're both from traditional business schools, and we've been doing the rounds of traditional business schools. So we're sort of looking forward to what's in store today. We'll see.
Yeah, I think today will be very different. But you don't need any introduction, but I'll still go ahead and do it anyways. And everyone's already done their research on LinkedIn, I'm sure. They're curious enough to do that. But Vivek sir, so you obviously were at Bain for many years, almost a decade or more than that.
12 years, yeah.
12 years.
Yeah.
And thereafter, you've been building brands, first at Godrej, then at boAt, and you sit on the board of, I think, every major consumer brand that exists. Magic Pin, of course, Mamaearth, etc. So we're very, very inspired to have you here.
Thank you.
And we're looking forward to all consuming the content that you've come up with in this book. Very aptly named Headstart, and we'll get into that more. And Sunder, of course, I was trying to figure out a way to summarize your LinkedIn. And believe me, it's very tough. So I'll just, tell you about his last 2 stints. Most recently, of course, he's at Dr. Reddy's, and he's doing some very interesting work there around an innovation center. We'll let you explain this later. I couldn't understand this from your LinkedIn. But before that, of course, you were at GSK and building, again, brands and transformation work there. So great to have you guys. I want to start with the most obvious question. What problem are you solving with this book? Right?
First of all, lovely guys. Thank you for making the time in the midst of your busy academic schedule to be here. So what are we solving for? So I think what was very clear to me, over the last 10 years, outside of a business review or a commercial review that I was doing, every conversation with a team member was invariably a career conversation, right? So it was either about, hey, should I stay or go? How do I navigate? Well, not really clicking with my boss, functional expert. Should I move into general management? How do I pivot? How do I go from marketing into sales? How do I go from operations into business unit head? So you realize there's a lot of appetite for career advisory. So that's on one end of the spectrum, and which sort of validated our belief to say there's a lot of demand for a product like this. Let's put it that way. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we said, well, what is it that people have access to? What is it that you guys are consuming? And we felt there's a whole lot of information on social coming through creators, coming through influencers. Some of that stuff is great, but we felt not always is that coming from a place of lived experience, right? So either it's over dramatic, it's a lot of hyperbole, it's a lot of clickbaity, and we felt, hey, there's a middle ground, right? How do we make sure that mistakes that we've made, and we've been operators throughout our careers, right? We've gone through the ranks, done the traditional business school type of journey that all of you are doing, are going to do. We felt, how do we help the next gen of leaders avoid the errors that we made? So you guys don't make the same mistakes. You can make newer mistakes, your own unique mistakes. That was one idea. And 2, how do we make it real? This is not about, read the book and become a CEO in 5 years or get to XYZ salary or become an entrepreneur. This is really about how do you build the work ethic to play the long game? And as Vivek will tell you very correctly, careers are a 40, 50-year journey. It's a marathon. So how are you preparing yourself to stay relevant long term? I think that's the problem that we're trying to solve.
Got it. Go ahead.
I think exactly the last point which you said, that in today's day and time, we feel that everybody is in a rush, right? With the startup evaluations, with becoming a founder, right? All the LinkedIn posts which we are posting every day, everybody seems to be in a rush. And the points which you have mentioned in the book, exactly as you said, right? That because you've been in this journey, you have operated. Those insights are very valuable and will help us in a long way. So I think understanding that we need to have the expertise coming from people who have actually, while I was going through the book and the guidance, that there's a huge difference and that gap is very evident. So I mean, very thrilled to know all of that.
The point you're raising is an important one. See, all of you, today's generation, the kind of courage and boldness we see and the kind of thinking we see is really energizing and quite amazing. But today's generation does not want to wait for 30 or 40 years either. There's a certain amount of restlessness, a certain amount of impatience, which Gen Z today has. And if channeled well, that can be absolutely amazing, right? Why do you have to wait for 30 years to launch your own venture? You are a good example of somebody who, when he was 18, began thinking about starting your own companies.
Right.
So the beauty today is that there are so many opportunities that are available, which our generation could not have ever dreamed of.
Right.
At the same time, life is very complex today, right? Whether it's the pressure of social media, whether it's the pressure of mental health, the kind of layoffs that are happening all across the world. And so how do you find a way to channel these opportunities, yet also teach people some of the skills that are required to actually thrive for 40, 50 years? Because that's the typical amount of length of a career, actually.
Right.
So you've written a book. I'm sure I haven't read it yet, but I'm sure there are many, many stories, right? There's one thing to write a self-help book or just a pedantic rant, right? But I'm sure in this one, at least from the TOC, I could make out there are a lot of stories. So are there any stories that are like your favorite from the book?
The way we've sort of thought about the stories is the stories actually summarize every section of the book. And the story is of a person we've had the fortune of coaching, working with. So it's actually a real person that you guys can look up and connect with on LinkedIn. So I'll give you a story of Raghuveer, who, I used to work at a pharmaceutical company called Pfizer earlier. And, Raghuveer was part of my team, very traditional career path, top undergrad, one of the top engineering schools undergrad, one of the ISB actually, and then came into was working in healthcare. And while he was there, he realized his passion for solving a real problem. So I think the reason I'm sort of highlighting there is sometimes we think in a linear way about starting up. We start dissing big company jobs. You may actually find a real customer need even while you're working for a very large company, which is what happened with Raghuveer. So he realized that, hey, there's a specific problem that patients who suffer, who obviously unfortunately have to deal with cancer, go through. Women specifically, which is hair loss, right? And how traumatizing, how big a deal that can be. So he thought about this idea of coming out with this really air cooling machine, which women who are going through chemo can actually use, almost like a hair massager. But the therapeutic effect of that is your hair loss dramatically reduces by 40%.
Wow.
Now talk to a woman who has battled cancer and give her the proposition to say 40% less hair loss. You'd be surprised at how dramatic the reaction would be. It's a real problem, right? He found that, started out on his, worked for large companies like Pfizer, Roche, started up on his own, actually went to Shark Tank. Many of the sharks funded his venture. So that's a great example. That's one of my favorite stories of how you can do all the traditional career paths, be the good boy, good girl that the context prepares you for, go to your business school, work for big companies, but still eventually discover a problem, find your passion, and eventually go and go on that adventure. So that's something that I thought would be useful to share.
What about
with you
yours?
guys.
Yeah, there are 2 or 3 stories which stand out. One is Vinita Singh, the co-founder of Sugar Cosmetics. And it's the last story in the book. And the last section in the book is about how to be a marathon runner. And Vinita literally is a marathon runner. So she takes lessons from her life in terms of having run marathons and how she applies it to the work world. The other inspiring story is in the section called Be a Go-Getter with Ahana Gautam, who is the founder of Open Secret.
Right.
And Ahana grew up in Bharatpur, Rajasthan, in a very conservative family. From there went to IIT, then went to HBS, was working with P&G and then General Mills. and had this mission about creating an unjunking brand, right? And I met Ahana, and I was one of her first investors, investing on the basis of a PowerPoint slide. No product, nothing, those were the good old days also, Pratham, But, it was amazing. Just on her just sheer passion of what she wanted to do, she said, Vivek, please come on board. And I said, would be happy to support you. So her story is about, the entire go-getter, journey. And Ahana is somewhat controversial in that chapter. She says, look, there are 3 axes one can optimize in life. One is about your axis for health, right? The other is work. And then the third is social needs.
Okay.
She said, at a given point, her belief is you can only optimize 2 things.
2 out of 3.
2 out of 3. And so she's chosen to optimize on the work and the health side, making a conscious call that today her friends think she's forgotten them, so be it. But that kind of, clarity on what kind of trade-offs you're supposed to make in life as an entrepreneur was quite amazing. And in that same chapter, we have some quotes from Varun Alag, the co-founder of Mamaearth. And Varun talks about when he started working on the importance of just making things done. And he said, look, my title was Get Shit Done Officer, at work. So in some ways, some of these stories are where the founders have really opened themselves and they're fairly vulnerable to actually sharing what are very real world examples of all the challenges they've gone through. Because today we glorify and say these are all celebrated heroes, and they are. But behind that, there is a journey of, feeling like an imposter, insecurity, struggles, challenges. And Pratham, we've tried to bring those out in a more human manner in the book.
I have a more fundamental question.
Yeah.
Right, which is, and there's a Harvard professor, Clayton Christensen, I don't know if he was there at your time. Right? He talks about this concept of how will you measure your life?
Correct.
What does success even mean?
Yeah.
And all of us, I think for a lot of us in the room, it's about, going public or becoming a CEO, and you've had those journeys, right? What really does, once you've achieved everything, success mean at the end of the day?
The thing that we've realized, first of all, is that each one's definition of success needs to be very personal, right? When you're young, you define success based on what other people tell you. You want to make your parents proud. You want to do things for other people. And so the playbook for success just does not necessarily tend to be a personal one. So one big learning we've had is over time, can you actually create your own playbook for success? What does success mean to you? For some people, it might mean lots of money. It might mean great titles. It might become being a CEO. For others, it just might be creating a huge amount of an impact or a difference that you want to make, either in the for-profit world or the non-profit world. But the definition, Pratham, is also quite, dynamic. The first 10 years, we were also fairly stuck in terms of compensation and titles and promotions. Then once you get that, then you start wondering, hey, this is not enough. What more can there be? And the definition again changes into perhaps bigger roles, maybe creating something on your own. But for me at this stage, a lot of success is about giving back now, right? If we can play a small role in being able to energize and enable the next generation, that to me is success now. It's no longer measured in terms of, money or titles or power or running a public company. I think I've fortunately had the privilege of doing all of that. But having done that in that classical Maslow's hierarchy, I think we're at that stage where for me,
Actualization.
it's far more about just helping, being behind the scenes and actually seeing other people be more successful. And there's a huge amount of joy that both of us get even now when somebody who was our entry-level sales manager is becoming a CEO in some company, or somebody else is launching their own, venture. So I think we are defining success more in terms of what others are achieving. And if we can play a small role in just being a bit of a catalyst, that's, I think, success, at least for me at this stage.
And I think one of the things I want to add is we don't want, the generation today to think of it in an isolated term, right? That, you got to do your corporate story and then maybe you can think about giving back, and it maybe takes 20 years to get to the top of the Maslow or what have you. We actually have examples. So one of the people we are fortunate to quote in the book is Kailash Satyarthi, right? Of course, he's not a corporate leader or anything like that, but phenomenally successful, right? Given the work that he's doing and the impact he's able to create. You could argue, he's actually impacting a lot more than what a traditional private company CEO would, right? So that's one example. But we also have other examples of, a gentleman that Vivek worked with called Omar in Godrej Group, who's a CXO, a senior leader within the Godrej Group, but has chosen to spend half his time only at work and the other half is on social causes, right? So I think the point that we're trying to drive is it's very individual. It's not either or. You can do whatever it is that makes you thrive today and then have a parallel impact story or contribution story or do something that sort of really makes you feel great. It doesn't have to be, I'll do 20 years of work and then I'll get to it. So,
But would you, let's say you're just graduating from your respective MBA programs.
Right.
Is there anything you would want to change about your trajectory looking back and with all the lessons in this book?
Well, personally, nothing. I started my career in 2003 after a business school degree, just like all of you from a university in Australia. Career has been kind, life has been kind, and so much as you go along, right? I think at least 21 years down the line, I've realized so much of anything what we call success is just luck. You were at the right place at the right time. You had the right leaders take bets on you. And that there's an entire section in the book called Be a Boss Magnet.
Yeah.
Because we've realized, like, if you have the right boss, they can literally be the rocket speed, right? And if you don't,
Right.
then I don't need to go into the details, right? But I think so much of what we eventually end up becoming is driven by not just your capabilities, but also about how willing others around you are to take bets on you, right? So I think that's important.
And Pratham, just to, to this point, I think if I had to rewind the clock and if I was sitting here in one of these seats, perhaps I chose a safer route, joining consulting, right? It was amazing. I love Bain, phenomenal experience, but just seeing what you are doing with Masters Union, the focus on experiential training, ability for so many youngsters to be able to experiment with an entrepreneurial mindset. Not all of them will become entrepreneurs, right? But what you're inculcating them is entrepreneurial mindset.
Correct.
And some of that will lead to actually them becoming very successful entrepreneurs. But some of them will actually become entrepreneurial in the jobs that they end up doing, right? At least when we were starting off, I don't think we were that entrepreneurial in our approach or thinking. It was fairly conventional in terms of our approach to the kind of jobs we took and the kind of education we went to. But just seeing the way, you and your team are innovating, to me, I think if I had to do it all over again, I'd be sitting in one of these chairs here. So,
Yeah. Welcome to.
And all of you guys who are applying for Bain, apply for Bain. It's okay. It's a good company. It's not a bad. It's a wonderful place to be in to start it.
I think the point which you made to be a boss magnet, right? I think it's very interesting to know that, all of us expect that we get a perfect boss. But in the book, it is mentioned that we need to work in a way that the boss gets to shine. Because at the end, that's how it will start rolling, and then the boss and the leaders around us will help us in our own journeys. I think today, a lot of times we see that, I don't want to apply to this company because probably the boss is not nice or the culture is not nice. But probably once we get into that journey and help them in their work, I think that will make our lives much easier.
How many of you guys have work experience already, just by show of hands?
Yes.
So you guys probably know this, right? So look, you think about bosses, the common narrative across enterprises is this is not about sucking up.
Yeah.
Okay, this is not about just being artificial and laughing at bad jokes of your boss and things like that.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
The point we're trying to make is, well, number one, your boss doesn't just drop from some other planet. It's just like you and us, right? Maybe similar backgrounds. Maybe you're just a few years ahead of you in terms of life stage. They're a person, right? So they come with their baggage. I think a good place to start, which is what we're recommending in the book, is to actually just take the time and understand, well, who's this individual that you're working for, right? What sort of experiences do they bring to the table, right? What does good look like? What is a good day? How do they show up when it's a good day? How do they show up when it's a bad day? And if you just observe, just like we do with friends, I mean, how do you build any functional relationship? You collect data points. You know a little bit about your friends. That's why you call them friends. Now, how much do you know about your bosses? You'll be surprised how little people invest, right? Just in finding out fundamental elements about who this person is beyond the title and beyond the directions they're giving you. Great first step. I think that solves a lot of problems.
Get to know them.
Get to know them. As simple, and like I said, you'd be surprised how few people do this, right? The second piece is understand value. And we're big believers in that. Your boss is there to drive an enterprise agenda, to solve a problem.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Why don't you actually become a catalyst for them? Can you figure out how does your boss create value? If they're the marketing head, they're the supply chain head, they're the warehousing head, what have you. Can you become a part of their growth agenda? Deliver value. If you are seen as someone who delivers value, you obviously are going to become the boss's favorite.
Can you give us an example of what that looks like in real life? Like someone who's a boss man and someone who's not. And maybe an example from a marketing department or an HR department.
So I'll give you a personal example.
Perfect.
Right? I moved into a P&L role a few years back. I used to be in functional leadership. I had a boss who said, hey, you know what? And this was when I used to work for GSK. A new country head, a managing director role is coming up. You've done a lot of good functional roles. I think it's time you go lead a country because then the buck stops with you, I stepped into the role. What worked? What worked in my case and what led to this recommendation is when this individual came to India to do the chief exec role for India, I was amongst the few younger leaders in the company who actually went into him and said, hey, you know what? I'm happy to spend a few hours every week helping you onboard into your role. Now, this was both a sign of confidence and a little outrageous as well, right? Because for me to say, hey, I'm going to help you onboard and see you. But, credit to the leader, he took that as, hey, not only does this person have the confidence, but actually is willing to do whatever. And what that meant was actually me taking the stake because I came from an area of commercial excellence and sales and marketing. So I took the time to actually give him all the nuts and bolts that a typical chief exec will not get in a conventional onboarding, right? That became my calling card. That became my access to his office. And of course, it's not like I had a role in mind while I was doing it. It's not like I had a time frame in mind. I just thought it'd be interesting to do it. And I wasn't, I was not trying to be foolish or naive as well. I knew, of course, there's some sort of a positive outcome associated with a behavior like this. It's just that you don't put a tag and say, this has to play out like this, right? The dots will join. You don't know how. The behaviors have to come through first. The outcomes will happen.
I think we need to have a high intent and then rest is on the universe.
So one of the things we actually are telling in the book to, which I think all of you can start doing now or whenever you get into your professional environment is when you speak to your bosses, and by boss, we just don't mean one individual. When you're managing up, please always finish the conversation with one simple question. What can I do for you? 99.999%
Write
don't
that
ask
down.
that question. Because you always think it's the other way around. They will deliver an outcome for me. They're going to solve something for me. Well, you bring something to the table. That's why you're there. It shows confidence. It shows self-assurance. And often you'd be surprised. They'll say, oh, really? Can you do this for me? And that becomes a bridge for you to stay connected with them.
If you can make your boss's life easy in any way, either,
And Pratham, the other important point, and Sundar's laid this very out, is it's not just important to build a relationship with your boss, but try and get to know your boss's boss as well, which most of us don't end up doing.
We don't think it's our place.
We don't think it's our place, but find some ways to be able to, build a relationship, have them know who you are, because bosses change also in life, right? So you need to have multiple connects in the organization, and sometimes most of us underestimate the importance of at least getting to know your boss's boss. And so if you put that down as one of the things to do, it can be very powerful over time.
Mr. Super, I want more such tactics. What else has worked?
Well, I think, at least what I struggle with, right? Like we all go through this feeling, yeah, ye nahi kar sakta hun, cheeky lagega thoda, right? I look artificial, all of that, right? And
I look like a climber.
Right.
Yeah, and look, we have these narratives, right? Many of us have worked before. So the guy or the girl who's sort of trying to be in the boss's, what we call there, we say, oh, you're sucking up. And then we have an alibi. We say, ye main nahi kar sakta. This is not me. Correct? But look, think about it this way. They're getting the outcomes. So as long as you're not artificial, as long as you're married to your domain, as long as you're not fake on that, you can't be surface level in your work. If your work is good, if you know what you're doing, if you're whatever domain that you've chosen to work in, if you know that, adding all of these pieces is not just a good to have, it's mandatory.
Yeah.
That just gives you the competitive edge.
There was a marketing manager in my previous company, and I remember one time he wrote a 3-page feedback for me, right? And I was the CEO, I was the founder, and the feedback actually made sense.
Wow.
Right? He's like, I have observed you do this. When you walk into the room, you always have very like this serious face, and that scares all of us. And if you can just come with a smile in the morning, it'll make. And I changed my behavior because of that. Right? And I found that really, really valuable. Now, most people will not think of giving feedback directly to the CEO.
Oh yeah, it's very helpful.
But that really has.
I remember
stayed with me.
there was his story is featured in the book. There was a guy called Prasad who used to work with me when I was running the business in Sri Lanka, and he was a Sri Lankan, Prasad Magnama, and he would put in 30 minutes meeting with me every month, and the subject of the meeting was no agenda check-in. Right? I mean, this was the first time somebody was doing this to me, so I wasn't even used to it. So my first meeting like that, I mean, obviously, as a leader, I wanted to be nice. So he's asking, and he was my marketing head, right? So I said, fine, we'll do it. And I said, look, Prasad, I'm really curious. What do you mean by no agenda check-in? I said, that's what I mean, Sunder. It's no agenda check-in. I'm not here to tell you a problem. I'm not here to show what I have done. I'm not here to ask you for my next promotion. I'm just here to talk. I just want to also give this. And he had the confidence to tell me, I want to also create space for you to tell me what's going on with you.
And the reality is 1% of the bosses will be proactive enough to
do it.
Do it. Most of us have to be proactive to ask for that feedback. And, at Lightspeed Ventures, the portfolio head is a guy called Gaurav Punya, brilliant guy. And Gaurav and I work very closely together. I'm not his boss, but I'm technically more senior than him. And what Gaurav has done is that we tend to go to Bangalore a fair bit. And every single visit, he finds a new microbrewery, right? And we go in, and I know this is his feedback time. Over sampling, beers, he asks for feedback. And it's almost become a ritual for us. At least once a month, it leads to this. But Gaurav takes the initiative, right? He finds the place to, make me also interested to come there. I love spending time with him, but I know the way he's done it is a very smart way to not call it an agenda check-in, but yet find ways to give feedback.
And guys, stuff like this works, right? I mean, Gaurav, that's why we remember these guys, they're in our books. Correct. So please do things like these.
So I have to tell you this, that we have around 4 or 5 people from Bain in our team.
Right.
Swati, and,
yes.
and a bunch of other folks, right?
Right.
And one thing they're very proactive about is that weekly check-in and that monthly check-in.
Right.
And they'll make sure that 24 hours before the check-in, they send me the agenda.
Yeah.
Right. And then in the meeting, it's super structured. 30 minutes, they'll finish the meeting. And then there's a 30, okay, Pratham, anything else you have to talk about? And that makes my life so easy. Like, I know that I can just trust them and I don't have to keep anything in my mind. Mujhe kuch yaad nahi rakhna. They'll take care of everything. That just inspires so much trust, and you want to give them more and more responsibility.
Absolutely, yeah.
Was that something that was structured at Bain?
Yeah, see, again, depends on the business model there, right? So if you go back and look at consulting, you have a 3 or 4 month project with very tight deadlines, very aggressive deliverables. And what teams hate is that late night, last minute things, because things haven't been scoped properly. Sometimes with clients it happens, but generally the onus is for everyone to keep the work as structured as possible, because if you don't do it, it leads to massive yield loss and lots of late nights, firefighting. So the people who learn to be good managers learn the importance of structuring. Second is the entire staffing model is a bit of a free market model, right? If you want the best people to work for you,
you have to
also be a good manager. Otherwise, people will not want to work for you. And your life only gets better if the best people are working for you. So because of this somewhat free market system, generally the onus is again on being able to structure. It's an apprentice business. People follow each other. The third thing is that Bain is actually very good about actually tracking and reporting project level NPS on a monthly basis. And it's put up publicly, right? So you know who are the managers killing teams and who are the managers who are actually great to work with. that amount of public recognition and public shaming also creates a system where people try their best to be able to be viewed as great people managers who give feedback and structure. So in some ways, the firm has thought through every single thing on its business model to figure out what ends up working with us. And eventually, I think, the kind of people who get hired by Bain, obviously, they have a certain kind of a DNA, who tend to be slightly more people focused, who have a strong need for affiliation. So one obviously is the right people you hire. But then do you create the right enabling operating model to be able to deliver on some of the objectives that are so important for the firm?
And we spoke about what to do,
Right.
their strategies at work, what not to do. What have you seen in terms of things going wrong, in terms of bad behaviors, which may at first feel like good behaviors?
Well, I think, ambition is great. It's a little bit of a double-edged sword, right? Because you have to be able to calibrate it with the environment in which you're in, right? Just to give you a very recent example, right? We were giving a talk at this large, one of the largest semicon companies called Micron, right? I think they're 27 billion in revenue, right? And we were with Anand, who's the managing director, and he said, look, my number one problem is the 28-year-old engineer coming to me and saying, hey, I want to be director, right? And the challenge of me telling him, yes, you're good. Yes, you're smart. Yes, you can do it. But hey, you know what? You're 28. You got to wait your turn, right? It's a little bit of that. So again, either you become an entrepreneur, in which case you set the rules, right? You set the landscape, you decide your pace. If you've made the choice to be in a large setup, agnostic of industries, I think your ability to understand pacing, your ability to understand navigation in that context, because do keep in mind that large organizations are very conscious about setting precedents. And therefore, often you will see HRs telling you, oh, we won't make an exception because it just sets a bad precedent, right? So I think your ability to just calibrate, if you want to play that game, right? There's no point. I see a whole lot of people joining fairly large organizations, whether it's HUL, whether it's GSK or other similar companies, and then expecting magic to happen in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, right? So I think you got to just be thoughtful about where you are, what works there, and make sure whatever you're trying to do or how you're trying to come across fits into that environment.
Sir, all of us are currently working on building our ventures, and we're in the journey of building our co-founders, finding our co-founders, building our teams. I find it very fascinating that you both have come from such a diverse background, your own experiences. I really want to know more about how the synergy was while you were working on this book, right? Because this is as big as building a venture, right? So how was the synergies? What was the discussion, and how was that process? If you can shed some light on that.
Yeah, so Sunder and I have known each other for quite a few years.
Okay.
So there was a certain amount of familiarity and joint respect for each other. What was very important also was for us to be united on the mission and what we wanted to do.
Right.
So we spent the first 2-3 months just discussing and debating, what's the core need? Where is the problem gap? We had a focus groups of almost 100 people, of your age, just talking to people, spending time trying to figure out, look, here is what the gap is. Here is my preferred approach. Here is his preferred approach. And the more time we spent together, I think the synergies became far more important. In some ways, we have somewhat similar backgrounds, but we also have very complementary skill sets.
Yeah.
So each time you're looking for a co-founder, right, the first step is to always make sure that there's enough commonality,
Right.
that at a fundamental values perspective, how aligned are you?
Correct.
Because if there is a values mismatch, then most co-founder relationships end up breaking up as a result of that. One is, how much alignment is there in terms of the core values?
How do you test that? I've heard that before, but it's very hard for me to.
So,
do it.
simple things with a co-founder, right? You can find out about, how do they think about building a team, right? How much do they want to do on their own? How much trust do they have? Are they willing to give up at what point? Are they willing to get into the details? Are they willing to go out of their comfort zone? I think there are a bunch of questions around trust, respect, ways of working that are, very, very important, and I think was it Leo Tolstoy who had this amazing quote that what makes marriage work is not how compatible two people are, but how they deal with incompatibility.
Yeah.
So, in the beginning also we tested each other by disagreeing a little bit and see how each of us would react. And what was amazing was if I disagree, Sundar would say, Vivek, I hear you, but how about this?
Right.
And sometimes if I disagree with him, I'd keep it in cold storage for a day, then write to him with a more cogent argument saying, Sundar, I've thought about this, but I really think this is the way we should do it. And you try and see, can you appreciate the other person's point? Are you motivated more by ego, or are you motivated more by the mission of what you're trying to do? I think that's very important. The second is you have to have very complementary skill sets.
Yeah.
If there are two co-founders who are both product guys, trust me, it will be a disaster after some time because they will end up overlapping with each other, and then someone will try and be the CFO. So the idea again is to be very clear about what gives you energy, what your strengths are, and what the other person will bring to the table. So I am the idea generator. I'll think of these bold ideas and I'll say, ye karna hai. Sundar is a more practical guy. And I told Sundar in the beginning itself, if you want this book done on time, you have to give me deadlines as well. Because if you give me a deadline, I promise I'll deliver because I hate letting people down. It's true to Sundar's thing, every week assignments would be given. Vivek, it's your chapter to be done. Please give it back. The day before, he'd remind me, I'm hoping to get this tomorrow. If I didn't come that day, the next day, hey Vivek, do you need some help? Can I help you with that? But his structured approach was critical to combine a little bit with my idea generating approach. So we kind of knew what each other's strengths are. He's much more deeper in HR. I'm more deeper in integrative thinking. So I think as you look at co-founders, those two things are very important. Value alignment and complementary skill
And I
sets.
think so being vulnerable to each other, I mean, obviously because you guys are coming from a much more experienced place, I think with us being vulnerable and even talking about what we think is missing in us and therefore we are going for a co-founder and why it is valuable.
उसमें बहुत मुश्किल है to express it. You
Right.
want to be
That's where the
vulnerable,
friendship is required.
but honestly, and sometimes the biggest mistake people make is choosing friends to be co-founders.
Yeah.
I say think very, very hard about choosing your buddies to be co-founders because if something goes wrong, right, then it's not just a co-founder relationship, you're destroying a friendship, as well. And I can tell you, out of 7 companies that I've worked very closely with, 6 have had very, very troubled co-founder relationships, and at least 3 or 4 of them.
And the 7th one is husband-wife.
Yes. 2 of them husband-wife, Sugar
That's
and
true, that's
Mama Earth, they don't have a choice. They have a choice, but they don't have a choice in some ways.
Not as easy.
It's not that easy to be able to end up doing it. But lots of other companies, there's a lot of benefits to finding the right co-founder.
Right.
But over time, sustaining it's harder than a marriage.
I think, especially in the early parts, right? I mean, can't be overstated. And Vivek obviously said it in his usual matter of fact, but it's a fairly deep thing, right? I think respect.
Yeah.
Don't look for friends because I think that's what you default to say. Can I get along? The beer test doesn't work here, guys. Right? This is not neither does the airport test. If you've read about that, right? Oh, can I spend 5 hours? No, it's about respect. It's about what is it that each of you are bringing to the table, because why are you coming together? You're not coming together just to chin wag with each other. You're coming together to do something, to build a product, to solve a problem, to build a service.
In your
whatever.
experience, you've worked with so many leaders, founders. Which company out there or which leadership team out there you feel has the best co-founder chemistry or leader chemistry or CEO chairman chemistry or
I don't know. Vivek,
CEO chemistry?
You've got a front row seat there. So.
The 3 are couples that I've worked very closely with, right? One is Mama Earth, Varun and Ghazal. Second is Sugar, Kaushik and Vinita.
Yeah.
Third is the sleep company, Priyanka and Harshal, right? And, they will disagree with each other, right? But there's so much respect and they're all very complementary skill sets in terms of what they've been able to do. I think, and they've also been very clear that between them, who is actually the CEO? It is never easy. And in a couple of cases, it's the woman who is the CEO. So that also has this impact on, gender biases that we all already have. But to me, in the co-founder world, I've seen Pratham ki the spouses tend to be the ones who probably have the best co-founder relationships.
Very interesting.
Others, because you've been through, whether it is, and I'm looking at companies who are big successes, whether it's a Zomato, whether it's a delivery, right? They've all gone through difficult co-founder relationships, Udan, where ultimately it's one founder who has remained to run the company, and the others have had honorable, departures and discharges, so to speak. I think.
But I do want to highlight one example as well, because many of you, how many of you are thinking of or have already started out or are thinking of starting up as you finish this immersion? Oh yeah, quite a lot of you, right? I think get a co-founder. There's value. So I talk about this in the book as well. So I was an entrepreneur for 5 years, 2006 to 2011. 11, I got an exit. I thought doing some interesting things in very, very early ed tech space. A lot of, obviously, look back, a lot of missed opportunities, because I remember having very early conversations with Mayank, who then went on to build Upgrad and all of that with Ronnie, and what that space was in 2011 and what it has become now. But one of the mistakes I made is not get a co-founder. So the business really became about me. It became about my IP. It became about my relationships. And the lesson in that for me was I couldn't scale the business beyond my own maturity. Right? And it's almost like, now when I look back, it's almost like you came in the way of your own business.
Yeah.
Now, I wish I had somebody else who would say, hey, you know what? You've done till now. Now me. Now I'm going to take it forward.
And the key, though, my learning and advice to all of you is, if you can find a great co-founder with complementary skill sets, aligned values, fantastic. Structure it the right way from day one. Have the difficult discussion on who will eventually become the CEO of the company. This whole key, we'll figure it out, doesn't end up working. Figure out, if one leaves, what happens to equity in the company. Because if you can think about it, if two of you own, say, 40% of the company and an investor owns 20%, if a co-founder vests after 5 years and leaves, and the company still hasn't seen the path to value creation, the co-founder who is left is sitting with 40%, whereas you might be doing all the work.
Yeah.
Those are difficult discussions to have in terms of, if somebody wants to leave, what happens to equity, what happens to future roles, if there is a deadlock, who has veto power, is it a third-party intermediary, who should those be? Those are difficult discussions to have, but I think those are critical to have, because you'll also know through those discussions if that's the right co-founder or not.
There's a lot of advice that we give to students. On YouTube, a lot of it is available. There are many books. But at the end of the day, you have to make your mistake and then learn from it. I feel it's very hard to take advice and actually use it. So as you were writing the book, how did you think about that? Knowing that as human behavior, as it is, people will hear, they will appreciate what you're saying, but then they'll still do whatever they...
No, I think we were very clear. We say this in the book as well. Not all mistakes are worth making firsthand. So that's a proposition to begin with, right? Of course, you got to learn, you got to make your own mistakes, and you got to burn your hand and learn. But, not everything has to be done yourself. Because one, it's just not smart. Two, it's not practical.
Yeah.
Right? So I think the smart way to do this is to say, hey, how can I absorb lessons? Why do you come for formal education? The idea that you're here is just that, right? Which is to say, hey, you know what? There are certain universal truths that are codified. If the world was so esoteric to say, to each his or her own, every path works, then you wouldn't need any formal education or structure.
Right.
So the idea of coming together in a setting like this, the idea of reading a book is to say, hey, some things are universal truths, some things work. I'm not, let's not try to get clever about those. And then let's get really clever about other things. Make my own unique mistakes. Learn the lessons from there. That's just a more efficient way of doing it.
Okay, slightly more meta.
Yeah.
I read this article, I don't know how many of you also did, that maybe in the next 5 years, or maybe even sooner than that, we'll have a unicorn out there or a large company out there which will have a single employee. Right? And the rest, everything would be AI agents doing most of the work. Right? How do you see that future? And then where does this advice play in that existence?
See, I think, Pratham, at least in India, we are still underestimating the power of AI.
Underestimating. Okay.
Underestimating it. I think if I talk to corporates, they're all talking about it, but I think we are still probably have a tunnel vision. It will happen in the future. I think AI is going to hit us far sooner than what any of us are expecting. And this scenario of an organization, whether it's 1 or 20 or 30 employees, that's less the debate. But clearly, fundamentally, you will start seeing organizations that are created, which are a network or an ecosystem, right? I think in a situation like this as well, some of the softer skills, which is, they're as hard as soft, right? Creativity, judgment, empathy, curiosity, those will remain as important as ever. And the single most important thing which you are doing with all the students here is how to make them become just better and faster problem solvers. The nature of tech might change, the coding languages might change, the systems might change. But fundamentally, we'll still have to find ways to use tech to solve problems. So if we can become better systems thinkers, if we can become better problem solvers, I think that's the best currency that we have to be able to remain relevant over the next 10, 20, 30 years. But, for example, we are now, if you look at the number of jobs that the IT industry has created this year versus last year, the numbers have come down significantly. Now, no one is saying it's the impact of AI, but if you look at even the rudimentary applications of AI, which are more conversational in nature, we haven't even gone into agentic AI yet, but even with conversational AI, the kind of impact that's happening on tech support jobs, customer support, documentation, testing, that's where a lot of entry-level IT jobs get created. And the numbers are coming down, but for obviously political reasons, no one wants to mention it. But in this phase itself, if you're seeing this impact over time, it can be huge. But having said that, there will still be a huge demand for medical professionals, right? Could India actually become, if India truly wants to become the powerhouse for global services, could we become the powerhouse for global services for radiologists, pathologists, nurses, medical technicians for all around the world? Because the tech can all be based here. Our beauty is still the huge number of young people that we have. If we can make them AI literate, if we can integrate technology into their curriculums, I still feel like the jobs will change. And I remember reading somewhere that there's less risk of somebody losing a job to AI, but more risk of losing a job to someone who knows
how to use AI.
And so we just have to find a way to use it and adapt it. The nature of jobs will change, but I'm still optimistic that there will be a new class of jobs that will get created over time.
So if I can ask, how many of you are actually using AI just day-to-day basis in stuff that you guys do? All of you, right?
It's amazing.
Let me give you, there's an example that I shared a couple of days back in another forum as well, and I thought it drives the point well. We are in an educational institute, right? How many of you have heard of this global coach, author, management thinker called Marshall Goldsmith? One of his classic books, which sells even today, is What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And he's obviously done, so he's like rated one of the top coaches in the world, right? There's actually a website, you can go look it up later today. It's called marshallgoldsmith.ai. And an Indian company, Fractal Analytics, has actually created this for Marshall. What they've done is they've trained the AI on, and it's a large language model, not just simple machine learning, on everything that Marshall's put out there in the last 40 years. Books, talks, podcasts, this, that, what have you. Literature, right? And now it's a live avatar. So you go to marshallgoldsmith.ai, which you can do now. Ask Marshall, whatever. So this is literally, think about it. It's Marshall Goldsmith who coaches the chief exec of Pfizer and Ford Motors and stuff like that on your phone, on video, personally answering your career dilemmas.
Awesome.
This isn't some future vision. This is today,
Have you created your own bots? Yeah.
No. Right? So I hope some of you are checking
Avatars,
it out.
you know.
So
the
who wants to
word of-
take up that
But I
responsibility?
think the point I'm making is, sometimes when we think about things like, you think some futuristic, you think, we use it almost as a softer way of procrastinating, saying, yaar, mere ko kuch nahi hoga, ye to 5 saal baad hoga,
You know, and
type of a thing.
just to build on this, and Pratham, you've been the pioneer of experiential training, right? A lot of leadership training is being questioned quite a bit because you don't learn tennis by reading an HBS case study. Though I went to HBS, but you don't learn tennis by reading an HBS case study, right? So you have to learn how to
Correct.
practice. And for leaders, how do you end up practicing? Very difficult to do that, right? Because typically you send them to a very expensive executive education course and they come back, they start working on their day-to-day jobs, they forget it.
Yeah.
With AI now, you can actually have a very personalized coach, which actually gives you practices every day. The coach can tell you what skill do you want to work on. And there's a professor called Hitendra Wadhwa, who I work with from Columbia. He's developed a lift model with a great article written in HBR recently about, how do you use the lift model. But you can tell this AI model that, look, I have a very important presentation that is tomorrow at my board of directors. And one of the board members is a very difficult board member. So how do I actually convince him or her about my CapEx proposal, right? You can fit it to AI, to the engine. They will ask you a few questions. Tell me more about this person. And you build the context in, which is where prompt engineering becomes a very important skill set, right? And then the AI model will actually give you 5 or 6 techniques to be able to use there. And then they'll say, do you want to try it with me or not? You can try it, and then the AI engine will give you a score saying, look, you've done this, I think you're a 3 on 5. Then you can say, look, what can I do to be a 4 on 5?
Yeah.
Gives you more feedback. Then it says, can you try it again?
Yeah.
These are things which are just starting to happen, but the possibilities of individualized, personalized, but it's all experience-based, right? So to me, the entire approach on very pedantic, school-based education will fundamentally get into a much more experience-based approach, which I think all of you have the good fortune of being part
you want to
of.
share?
I'm sorry,
So we
I'm sorry to
already,
labor the point here.
yes.
Yeah, as you can see, we are super excited and passionate about this topic, right? I'll give you a real example of what we're trying to do in our business, right? Because so that you get something very touch and feel. In healthcare, in the pharma world that I represent, we've got lots of salespeople, right? We go sell to doctors, healthcare professionals, right? We've got thousands of them. So in my region, it's a multi-country environment. I've got 2,000 plus salespeople. A very basic foundational question is, how do you get every one of them on message? We're dealing with scientific products, right? So there's the sales rep needs to have a
need them to
deep
say the same thing.
understanding. Exactly. We use AI to do that. So we use smart apps, enablement apps, where the marketeer is actually able to push out a case scenario. And this is today. This is not some vision statement. This is what we do. This is how we train our people today. Push out a case scenario. Your notification shows up on your app. If you're a sales rep, and a sales rep is a mini entrepreneur.
Yeah.
She's not working out of an office. She's in the field, right? She gets a notification. She sees it on her car. The notification tells you the customer archetype. I'm meeting Dr. Vivek. He's a pediatrician. He's a traditionalist. He's been practicing for 40 years. This is what his behavior is, right? Some information we have on our CRM systems. And then it'll say detail to Dr. Vivek as an example. And all I have to do is I'm ready. And it captures the video option of my phone or tablet or whatever device I'm using. I do a selfie video. I submit. It automatically gets routed to my line manager. And the AI, because I've already fed in what good looks like, so I've also fed the system what a great 2-minute elevator pitch on this medical product looks like. It tells me, like Vivek said, hey, you're a 4 on 5, Sunder, get better.
How much did you use AI for this book?
No.
Right? So, I mean, the reason I made that point is, guys, this is today. This is where we are already. Large companies are using it. So if you sort of do long range planning and say 2 saal baad kya hoga, 3 saal baad kya hoga, you can visualize yourself. But But I think the question that all of us had, right, when we graduated, and I'm sure you have, is, ठीक है यार, ये सब तो ठीक है, करना क्या है? दो तीन चीजें क्या है important, right? I think what I would say, and this has nothing to do with AI. Who are the people who are standing out in our teams? Simple guys. Number one, communication. 20 years पहले भी relevant था, आज भी relevant है. Can you become, please, this is our humble submission, can you guys become standout communicators? When you communicate, whether through the written word, whether when you speak, when you present, short form, long form, can you just make an impact? We love people like that. Even if you're 6 on 10 on the capability.
And that doesn't mean English and expression.
No, not language here. Yeah. It's about confidence. I mean, and there's a little bit of social context. We don't want to go into that. But in India, unfortunately, speaking in English becomes like a status thing. It's just confidence. You do it in whatever language you're comfortable, but your ability to just communicate the message with impact, super important. That's one. Decision making. Making a lot of decisions, small, big, critical, non-critical. That's what you do at work. And third, doesn't matter even if you're in the so-called softer functions, right? Please make sure that you build some solid understanding of data and analytics. And specifically, I mean basic models of statistics. Maybe you would not be surprised. So many guys we meet, they don't know what are the basics, right? Various regression models, wo log struggle kar rahe hain. All these models.
Whether you're in marketing, HR, you need that.
Right. You need that, right? And people struggle with things like these. So running Excel sheets, mining, making some story out of the numbers that get thrown at you in corporate environment. So communication, decision making, some very good statistical background, irrespective of whether you don't use excuses like, yaar, main maths mein acha nahi hu. It's a career skill.
And coding if you. Right. So
you get 2-3 of these right. Again, the 2 out of 3 rule. Right. You give yourself longevity. These are going to be hot here. Right. They're hot today. They'll be hot 5 years down the line. AI, I don't know. Right. Aaj hai, 5 saal baad, what avatar will be there? I don't think any of us can really think that far. But these are foundational work ethic skills. If you're good at it, you'll be relevant, hopefully, much, much longer.
Well said. Yeah.
One theme which is very relevant for all of us here is the career transition expert theme which you have mentioned. If you can shed some light for the audience, I think that will help.
Look, all of us have made transitions. You will make transitions. One is to have a good reason for why you're making the transition. Yeah. So there's a little bit of thinking through.
Yeah.
Where this manifests in a more day-to-day basis is job changes.
Correct.
Because we see a lot of people, you have a bad day at work and you're like, shit man, wrong job, I quit. Right? Something like that. I mean, you see that a lot, right? So one of the things we're talking about in the book is have a simple 2x2. This is where your business school education should help you. Push and pull matrix is what we're calling it. List down all the reasons for which you should stay in this job. And you would find no matter what environment you're in, there's enough to love about that place as well. Yeah. So please make a literally list down. Yeah. And then what is this new thing? Right? What is this new relationship that you're getting attracted to? Right? List down all the positives. That's your push and pull. And just sit objectively with the mentor and say, here are my reasons to stay. Here is what's great about the new offer. Let's have a chat. Why should you stay? Why should you go in the current one?
Yeah.
What's so great about this new attractive opportunity? And I'm sure, what do you think are some of the price that you will have to pay when you go in that direction? That's just tabulating. Again, 90% of the people that we've worked with don't even do this. If you just do this much and then sit with someone you trust, a trusted advisor, a friend, a senior, and say, boss, this is my view. Can you just have a quick look and tell me what you think? Stay or go. And chances are you'd make a much better decision versus you just relying emotionally.
So obvious and people don't do it.
Yeah, it's like a reflection note. I mean, it's as simple as a reflection.
The other part, I think, the other tool we use in this section is what we call the 3-move plan.
Okay.
Which is, think about what you want to do over the next couple of years, then 2 to 5 years, and then 5 years beyond. You may not even execute that, but it's good to at least think through what those 3 moves, could be. Move 1 could be is, in my current role, I want to get really good at the following things.
Yeah.
Move 2 could be, I want to get promoted to this level, or I want to try something new. Move 3 could be something I want global exposure. Again, the answer will vary for each of you. As an entrepreneur, it can also be the next couple of years, I want to get to PMF, right? The following years, I really want to be able to try and get to CM2 positive.
Correct.
And in 5 years, I want to at least either look for an option for an exit or could be an IPO. It can depend on what those are. But I think having a little bit of that honesty and then saying for these 3 moves, what will it take for me to get there is a useful exercise.
Right.
The answer may change, but it's important to look at that every 6 months or 12 months and say, am I broadly on track? Have things changed? But I think that to me is a very important part to think through how to actually manage your career. And I don't advocate 20, 30-year plans because life is too short now and things change. But at least have some idea of the kind of direction you want to go in over the next 5 years, 5 years or so. And when Pratham and I were talking last week, he was very clear about his 5-year plan, by the way, right?
So everybody knows.
Yeah, right. So please tell them,
They know. They can
know,
repeat
right?
it back to you.
So he's like, I want to be a top 10 global MBA school in 5 years, right? The clarity was there. So
Correct.
in his mind, he has that 3-move plan, but he thinks that way. For those of you who don't think that way, go through the process of actually putting it down on paper.
So guys, I think the long story short, plan on paper is a plan here.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
If it's in your head, it's just some fuzzy ideas.
Right. I in fact I gave an interview to Economic Times and they wrote an article, Masters Union planning to be top 10 in 5 years. I was like, now it's out in the open.
Right.
Now I have to do it.
Public
Yes.
accountability.
It's in the public.
Yes.
On that note, I want to open it up to the students here
Sure.
as well. Guys, I'm sure you have, all right, the drill is, okay.
So essentially, sir, we are all building businesses of our own, and with your plethora of experience in the consumer sector, sir, how important is the trade-off between sustainability and ethical sourcing when it comes to compromising on your quality and profitability? So in today's day and age, how important is that trade-off, and where do you draw the line? If you could shed some light on this.
Amazing question. And giving my suggestion is start with your heart first. What is truly important to you as a person, right? So, because the best businesses are built when founders actually speak from the heart first and then the head comes in. So fundamentally, how important is, ethical sourcing to you? The party line everyone will say is that it's very important. But most of the importance today is driven by regulation and what the laws of the land actually are. And it's very fascinating. And you can see a lot of surveys will actually say that Indian consumers are willing to pay more for sustainable brands, right? Think about it. Any consumer, you ask them, would you pay more? Who will say, no, I won't, right? And that's a flaw of consumer research. When you ask people something, and if you don't look at actual behavior, you get very misleading results. So far in India, I have not seen, either greater willingness to pay generally, or most companies on their own trying to do this because they feel like it's the right thing to do. There are a few companies, and Mama Earth is one of them, who is really focused on, for example, planting goodness as one of their big themes. But most people are actually focused on far more on being able to do what is required by law. So, unless you believe that the business you are creating will actually lead to either higher willingness to pay or higher retention, right? It might be a very long haul for you, at least in India today. I think the key will be is to focus on just ensuring that you are operating within the laws of the land, not cheating customers, but beyond that, expecting that you can create a business where ethical sourcing leads to higher value creation. I think I'm still a little skeptical about that in India today. Things might change 5 years down the road. Today, I don't see, if you talk to consumers, you will get misleading answers, I think, on something of this sort.
So it's less of an outside-in question. It's more an inside-out question, right? So you do it for you.
Yeah.
If you're thinking you're doing it because you're going to get premium pricing with consumers, maybe that hypothesis may not check out. But if you feel strongly about it and that's the personal angle you want to bring to whatever brand you're building, maybe that's a great play.
You can't have too many whole truths.
Yes, exactly. Yes. I love that.
Right? Yeah.
One of my friends is right now starting off in the lab industry. She's creating her own new parallel brand. And we were discussing how the nuances are like in this day of digital world. We want to understand how the PRO system actually works and how the offline marketing of such path labs, because it is usually driven by doctors. How to expand our although we have the best tech, the best softwares, but we don't know how to reach to the people. So I don't understand how your company works and how we can expand offline.
Look, number one, disclaimer, I mean, I'm not speaking on behalf of the company. We are publicly listed. We're not in the path lab business, so therefore we don't have operations there. But just, as an industry observer, what I see is it's a tough business to be in, a lot of pressure on margins. What's happening though now, and Thyrocare is a shining example, which is why they were sort of bought out as well, is the traditional model of path labs in India, if you look at the last 20 years, which is doctor recommendation and implicit understanding there between the path labs and the doctors. There was always a commissioning system that existed. That's changing now because I think the general recognition among all of us as consumers about taking matters of our health into our own hand is increasing. And that trend of consumerization of health. So if you look at the mega trend, what is a mega trend that all companies in the health space are trying to get to is this whole consumerization of health as a trend. And what that means is you and I are now having more and more agency to make decisions about health. Not just what we put in our mouth, but also what needles we choose to put in, what type of testing we want to do, what type of reports do we want to do, what frequency do we want to do it at, how invasive we want them to be, how do we want to connect these data points to other things that we may be doing. Those are choices that you and I are making. And now those choices are available at very decent price points. Yeah. So I think the play, therefore, is to say, hey, you know what? You will, and that's why you'll see most path labs have some sort of, they usually have this omni-channel approach, right? You have the lab infrastructure, right? But almost it's like the dark store equivalent in the quick commerce world. You don't now anymore see these big flashy labs. Right?
Yeah.
That's irrelevant because someone's going to come and take your samples at home anyway.
Right.
You don't care where it's getting processed as long as the report tells you exactly. So I think the focus is going to be on customer engagement, front ending. How can you be given more and more agency? And agency not just in terms of access, but also in terms of education. Because you're only going to demand that test if you actually feel that this marker is going to make a difference. So if that's the model, that's great. But if the focus is on, hey, let's expand, let's set up 7 centers, 10 centers. I mean, you can even outsource it now. There are these back-end labs as well that do
My sister just gifted me a semi-annual blood test plan.
Wow.
For 10 years.
That's a new GTM.
Yeah,
right?
yes.
Think about it.
Yes.
Right? It's going to come to my home to collect every 6 months. It has to happen.
It's very cool, right? Because you don't think of gifting somebody, but hey, if you're
It's a thoughtful
saying,
gift.
Yes.
if you're gifting insurance, why aren't you gifting a 3-year recurring test? Right?
So, Karan, I'm on the board of Metropolis Healthcare. So, if you ever want to talk, drop me an email and we can chat more about the
I'll
pathology.
collect your email from.
Yeah, it's on the book also, but you read the book then.
Buy the book, then you get the email.
But yeah, we can talk about that. I think it's a fascinating sector. Yeah.
As you also said that we need to have a good relationship with boss's boss, right? So in this competitive environment, how to build that trust so that we can have that particular not advantage, but kind of relationship that we might be in the future.
I think Sunder had covered most of it. Look, the starting step has to be you have to do well. Nail your work. At the end of the day, if you out-deliver what you're supposed to do, people will remember you, right? That's one. The second, we talked about, obviously a systematic process of engaging your boss, getting to know them, their style, their preferences, asking for feedback, being proactive. Those are all very important things to be able to do. But the other part, Lakshya, I would add is, we didn't cover it too much today, is the importance of building your own personal brand, right? So what will you be known for in the organization, particularly a large company, right? And you can decide, look, I want to be known for my social media skills. I'm going to be the guru of getting senior executives on Instagram, as an example. Or I'm going to become this Python guru. But start thinking in the beginning itself, what are those 2 or 3 things that will make you stand out? That's how reputations start getting built. And reputations are what people talk when you're not in the room. So if a bunch of senior executives are there and they're saying, oh, look, I'm on Instagram because Lakshya helped me. Think about how the word starts spreading. And then you can create these peer networks, you can get to know the organization. But my suggestion is figure out what you're good at, what you enjoy doing, and how do you leverage that to be known for 1 or 2 things. And I call them spikes. So in any interview I do, everyone is brilliant, right? I always look for those 1 or 2 spikes. What will really make that person stand out? Think about your own story and what actually makes you stand out.
And can I also add, Lakshya, one of the things I find myself telling, folks who come out of business school, join our teams is, please bring your best self to work today.
Don't wait.
Don't wait. Common conversation I'm having is, I'm asking, yeah, boss, why are you not delivering 100%? Why are you not hitting the ball out of the park? And the usual answer is, nahi, boss, wo meko grade mil jayega na, wo promotion mil jayega, uske baad dekhna main kya kamal karta hu. Right? Some magic is going to happen 2 years. So the platform you have today, that's your platform.
Yeah.
Track record, yeah.
That's it. You're at Masters Union today. If you want to be this great communicator, great decision maker, don't say after 2 years when I start working for XYZ Consulting, that's when I'll show the world how well I communicate. Well, start now. Do what you can today, here. This is your platform. Make it work for you. And that's a mindset. So wherever you are, you're not waiting. Because nothing's going to change. 2 years is going to be 2 years, right? So if you can't do it today, you probably would struggle 2 years down the line either. So,
Cool.
get on.
Okay, go ahead.
Sir, I ask this as a young professional who's eager to start up, but also thinks that entrepreneurship is way too romanticized. So my question to you is, what typical traits do you notice in a person who has had 5 years of corporate journey and then start?
There is a lot of value to learned experience. There's a lot of value to having failed in life, right? Sometimes making mistakes, sometimes failures. If you can use those failures to learn, right, it's amazing. And if you look at the data again, the most successful entrepreneurs globally are people between 45 and 55.
Who start up at that time?
Or they've started a
They
couple
start,
of
okay.
times and eventually they attain success
At that.
at that time. So some of them will start early, but true success actually happens between 45 and 55, right? And it's a fascinating question why that happens. It's about learned experience, about having learned how to manage teams, right? It's about having learned how to deal with failure, learning how to, do fundraising right, learning how to manage complexity. Those things end up taking time. Fortunately, you don't have to wait till that time. So my suggestion to people, whether it's someone in corporate or even Aryaman for you after graduating, if you have, कहते हैं ना दिमाग का कीड़ा कि अगर कुछ है आप में, right, which is making you not want to even sleep at night. So if you have that obsessive thing कि this is a problem that needs to be solved, and if you then have enough humility and awareness that is it a problem worth solving and do people care enough about solving? Today you can say, I think I want drones to fly all over the world. But is that a problem that is going to be solved today? Perhaps the answer may not be yes or no, I'm not saying. But is that number one, a problem which you are obsessed about? B, is this a problem which consumers and customers care about? Is it a big enough problem for them? And then third of all, is there a way to actually make money out of it, right? Because if you have this obsession, if consumers care about it, right? Drones could be one example, right? But they're not willing to necessarily pay for it, right? Then it's not a business, right? It becomes a hobby or it becomes a passion. But passion doesn't always lead to business. But I would just err on the side of asking those 3 questions. If you do that in a systematic manner, and look, the answer changes. A classic example you will all see is the world of quick commerce, right? If you go back to 3 or 4 years ago, for all the pilots that were happening, people ridiculed those pilots, saying, who needs these things in 10 minutes? What about driver safety? How will it actually end up working, etc. Then a bunch of forward-looking companies, one of them started by a 21-year-old who was 18 at that time, 21-year-old kid who, I've been fortunate to part of Lightspeed to have invested in, right? They set out to get the economic model right. And they focus far more on the darkster economics, got that right. And today, my guess is in 2 or 3 years, there'll be nothing called quick commerce. Everything will be, may not be 10 minutes, but everything is going to be whether half an hour, 1 hour, 2 hours, or 3 hours. The whole lines will completely blur. Consumer behavior has completely changed. When I talk to consumers, people who would have monthly shopping lists have stopped keeping those monthly shopping lists. So you've seen the model also evolve, but it started by the conviction. It started by some people feeling like the model can actually change. We can make it economically viable. And third of all, people are willing to, hopefully over time, pay for this additional convenience and benefit.
Other thing I would add is, you spoke about Ariman romanticizing this idea. I think where that comes from, and I've experienced it, when you fall in love with yourself, right? And you think, you start using terms like entrepreneur to describe yourself and all of that. I think that's where the drudgery of that begins, right? So look, it's work. I mean, if you just keep it simple, say it's work. You're working for an enterprise or you're working for your own enterprise. You're still making, you're still building, you're still selling, you're still billing. So that cycle is not so dramatically different if you think about it, right? You're doing all of those loops, even in a big environment, maybe with a few more people. So that's, I think, that if you think about it like that, it'll be straightforward. My request and submission to all of you young leaders would also be, the fact that we're here should actually increase, because people say risk and this and that. The fact that we are in this room should actually increase our risk appetite like crazy.
Yeah.
Look, obviously, let's be truthful, right? None of us here are actually even representative of the true India. We're all in a bubble of our own, right? You've got great undergraduate degrees. You're at a fantastic institution. If you don't have the courage to take on crazy ideas, who will? Because what's the worst that can happen? The worst that can happen is it won't work. You can try something else, or you can go and work for large organizations, learn that loop for a few years. You'd be fine. You'd find people who would hire you very quickly, right? So
failed entrepreneur makes for a great hire.
Fantastic, yeah.
And honestly, one of the criteria I use in interviews is to actually, I love people who've actually failed in life before.
Yeah.
Because it makes them hungrier. They have the fire in the belly. They can explain to me how they've channeled their learnings from failure into becoming a better person, right? I love that. Because to me, I feel like, I would bet on them because I know that they have something to prove. Yeah. If someone's been super successful their entire lives, then I worry about complacency.
Retirement
to na ho jaye, right? So that's the
so
exact
yeah, it'll be so cool if, I don't know, is this going to be on YouTube or whatever?
Yeah, right. Oh God.
There's 5 cameras out here. What do you think?
We are watching this on YouTube 2-3 years back and you're like, oh gosh, that guy is now a unicorn or
yes,
going to IPO and he was with us in Gurgaon, whatever, right? That'll be so cool.
Giri will be the expert in ethical sourcing, you will be doing Crystal's luxury business there, right? So, and you would be a glamorous entrepreneur, right? So, a romantic entrepreneur, right? So
that's very interesting going back and looking at these videos. But thank you so much for your time today. This was super awesome. I think I don't think there was even a single moment of, the tempo was just incredibly high. We love doing this and I hope you guys enjoyed as well.
Yeah. Thank you. You guys are in an amazing place and we are counting on all of you to lead to the next set of unicorns coming out of here.
Absolutely.
And congratulations, Pratham, and to all the amazing work that Masters Union is doing. I think we are very, very proud. And any help or any support you need, try and write to us. And please spread the word about the book as well. I think, we want people to get benefit from this. Spread the word. Post on your LinkedIn. It'll only help us. It's not a commercial venture for us. It's much more about, giving back and any help that you can give. And we are by your side, rooting for you, and good luck.
Awesome.
Thank you.